Do you want to start this episode? What's it about?
You told me, buddy.
Miata is always the answer.
That's fine, we can do that. Welcome to this episode of the Carmudgeon Show, where two relatively young people act like old men and say we hate everything, because we do. This is Derek Tam-Scott. I am Jason Cammisa Adam Sandler. And today we're going to discuss why Miata is the answer for everything, or so he thinks. I think I'm just going to argue with you about everything today.
I am actually like a relatively recent arrival to that. Maybe I'm like in the honeymoon phase. I hadn't, other than like sort of driving a spec Miata a little bit, I'd never driven one until earlier this year. And
Any Miata at all?
Any Miata at all.
Okay.
And so, like, it was a bit of a revelation to get out there and experience it, because, like, I come from an environment where I'm driving, like, I don't know, Porsches and stuff like that, and so I hadn't really Miata'd before, and
you hadn't listened to 25 years of the media saying, holy shit, this thing is amazing, it's so much fun, and you didn't hear any of that for 25 years?
I mean, someone asked me what kind of sports car to buy, and I told them to buy a Miata.
Oh, okay. So you had repeated the gospel according to the...
I'd never driven one. I just understood them to be good. And like, I mean, in many ways, it was consistent with my expectations. I would say the thing that most surprised me was that, like, the mechanical quality of, like, the interface is much higher quality than I thought it was going to be. Like, the shifter has a really pleasant mechanical feel.
This is an NA you're talking about, the first gen?
The first Miata I ever drove was an NC, actually.
Is this the one that you test drove and you sent me the video of you cackling like an idiot or someone cackling like an idiot while you were like drifting it around an on-ramp at a dealership or something? That smile.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, you're absolutely...
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. So it was an NC2. And then you drove NC2 and ND back to back, right?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so your first was NC2, second was ND.
And NDRF.
NDRF, okay.
Yeah, and then we just like hit up Turo, actually. Mm-hmm. So we NC'd, then we went to the dealer and drove an NDRF, and then we drove an ND stock the following weekend on Turo, which is actually like the least appealing driving experience of any of the Miatas that I had.
Really?
A stock ND. Well, I don't know, what do you think about those cars?
I mean, they're not as engaging as NC2. NC2 is
That's a controversial statement in the Miata sphere.
Well, fuck everyone who disagrees with me, but look, NC2 is way better steering than ND. The motor is a 7,700 RPM engine instead of a 6,500 RPM engine. And the ND is a little bit faster and has a lot more mid-range torque and shorter gears. Otherwise, the NC, I think NC2 was superior in every way. In terms of driving dynamics. With that said, ND's smaller and lighter and it's got some other stuff going for it. I couldn't decide. When I did a video of ND versus the Fiata, I had my business partner, my now business partner, my then director of the show, had an NC2, and we had an NC2, an ND, and a Fiata, and we couldn't decide which of the two Mazdas we liked better. So I don't know.
The thing I found distracting about the ND was the fact that it had all this like body motion that was sort of distracting, and you couldn't drive it or I found myself backing off because there was all this motion that was like a little unsettling and like alarming. And there was much better body control on the NC, which I was not expecting.
The NC, all Miatas, like being floppy in the corners, especially at the back end, where you turn in and the back of the car just goes over to the side into the bump stop, has been a Miata hallmark since day one. I mean, the first NAs did that. So that's sort of part of the Miata experience, but I think it got out of control on ND1. And they fixed it on ND1 RF and then ND2. And it's better, but it's still one floppy ass fucking car. I mean, it's the kind of car that you really have to slow your hands down. It's never gonna bite you. I mean, it'll throw itself 2 degrees sideways and then come right back in. But it's weird. You got to get used to it. Yeah.
Well, and it's something that you're conscious of and you're managing instead of focusing on driving. You're like focusing on weight transfer, right. Which, I mean, of course, driving is always weight transfer, but it's sort of distracting motion as opposed to like entertaining.
It is driving around it instead of just being able to enjoy what it is. And actually, by the time this comes out, we will have announced the motor. Oh my God, I can't believe I said that. Road and Track Performance Car of the Year, and we did have an ND2 RF there, and I really loved it. But I think it could have actually had a chance of winning if it had, instead of going from 150 horsepower to 181 horsepower, 155 to 181, if it had gone from 155 to 200 and from 6,000 RPM to like 9,000 RPM, because I have 30-year-old cars that rev to 7,500 RPM, like that's not a big deal anymore. And I think they buttoned up the suspension from absolutely terribly undamped in the corners to just flat out too much body roll. And I really wish Mazda had just taken this step to give us like a MazdaSpeed Miata. And their reaction when I talked to the engineers is like, hey, no, hold on. The Miata comes pre-MazdaSpeeded. And I'm like, what fucking performance car in the world heaves over like a 40-year-old Mercedes and the slightest suggestion of a corner? No, this doesn't exist. They really should do a Titan button down 9,000 RPM focused actual sports car, and that would be fucking amazing. And then I would argue that Miata is the answer for everything. Until then, I'm not entirely convinced.
Do they have a motor that can do that?
Now, no.
So they'd have to make a new motor.
Yeah, but they made this one go from 6,400 to 7,500 RPM.
I mean, Miata's not the answer to everything. I think that people say that always knowing that they don't actually mean it when they say it. But if you're looking for like an unadulterated sports car experience,
right.
And you also don't want the ass pain of like, I don't know, just the terrible things that come with owning old cars or expensive cars. Like,
sure.
It'll just go on for 300,000 miles and you could track it every weekend and get there doing that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of magical. I mean, those two things. I went to Miata reunion for the first time, and like it was interesting to survey all the old guys, because the old guys are like, I used to have Jensen Healey's and like Triumphs and like, Wait,
hold on. Were they as miserable and curmudgeonly as we are, while they were actually being old? I mean, I assume when you say old, you don't mean like my age.
No, like at least 2 to 3 years older.
I'm gonna fucking throw this water right at you. God, you're such a... not gonna say the C word on camera. Carmudgeon. Get it? C word? Anyway, so they would have like really, really terrible, like MGB GTs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, just Jensen Healey's, like terrible things that where like part of the process of owning the car was to go around it and tighten all the bolts once a week so that like stuff didn't fall off in this coming week. So like their standards are low, but like that used to be part of the sports car experience. It's no longer part of the sports car experience. I guess the thing that for me was really illuminating was the fact that after driving a bunch of like sort of extraordinary sports cars, that like the giggles and the joy that you experience in a car that I would say most people write off as being a hairdresser's car or as not being a proper sports car is actually kind of the closest spiritually to like the original sports car concept.
I'll be honest with you, I think the Miata is the only sports car left in the market. I think everything else that calls itself a sports car has moved into supercar territory. And this is a strange thing. Let me define the difference between. I think a supercar is something that exists for its performance, and a sports car is something that exists for its feeling, right? So you have fun in a sports car and you go really fast in a supercar. And I think that all of the other sports cars, including the benchmark sports car, the 911, have really moved into supercar territory where they have things like rear active steering and torque vectoring by braking and all of these other tricks that will help it get faster around a track. Magneto-rheological engine mounts, for fuck's sake. And then you have this idea of a simple sports car, which is this is relatively inexpensive, relatively simple. I get in it and I drive, and even at 15 miles an hour, I'm having fun. And I think really the Miata is the only car left in that class, in that category.
Are there any other contenders? Like
No.
a BRZ?
Okay, BRZ. Sorry, you're right. BRZ. BRZ is in there. I mean, it's not the sports car experience because it's a convertible. Because it's not a convertible. I was thinking roadsters. But yeah, you're totally right. BRZ is another one that people have said since the day it came out that it needed more power. Actually, they're pretty quick. They don't need more power. They need either an engine that doesn't sound like shit or an engine that has enough torque that you don't have to rev it to the point where it sounds like shit all the time. But this is a dying breed, and I love when I hear stories like people like you who've experienced the big boys. You've driven everything, where you get into something as simple as a Miata with, a little 4-cylinder and a stick shift, and it's just stupid laugh out loud fun
Yes,
all the time.
it's just the laughter. That was the thing that I was unprepared for, was how much uproarious laughter and that I could have on the street.
Right.
Like with the modern cars where the performance is so extraordinary, you're like, this is, like, I'm amused because the performance is like literally incredible. Like I cannot believe that it's happening, but it's not like the joy of the vehicle and sort of caning it.
I just had an experience where I was with Matt Farah, and Matt's a good driver, and he was in a 992 Carrera 2S, and I was in a Miata, and we were with Road and Track, and we were at the top of a mountain, and we flew down the mountain, and I was very ill behaved in the Miata. It was an ND2 RF, and just completely at the limit every single corner, ass out, because as soon as you touch anything, you know, it like throws its ass out. Just sliding around everything, just laughing my ass off. Got to the bottom of the hill, and I had to wait a long time for Matt to catch up. And Matt is a good driver, and he's very fast. And when he finally caught up, I was turning around to go look for the fireball, because I'm like, oh my God, he crashed. And he was laughing. He was like, dude, you were gone. And he said something that was funny. He was like, the fastest car down any mountain is a Miata. And I'm like, right? Like, haha. And then so I turned back around and went up the other side of the other mountain and lost him like 4 corners. So the thing about the Miata is, like, it is fun while you're normally driving it, and its limits are fairly low by sports car standards. But actually, they're right aligned with what you would do. So like, there are other cars that could do more, but you wouldn't, because you don't have sight lines around the corner, or you don't trust what the hell is going to happen when it breaks loose. Like, it could be a $300,000 car that you're going to
Yeah, or you're going 400 miles an hour,
Right.
and so you don't want to take that kind of risk in it.
Right, and so the Miata is willing, like, it's 10 tenths in a Miata is 8 tenths in something else, or 7 tenths in something else, but you're willing to do it. We got to the top of that mountain, the brakes were on fire in that car. They weren't actually flames, but there was a lot of smoke. And I was giggling, I couldn't stop laughing. And everyone else was like, yeah, that was a really good road. And I'm like, oh God, my arms hurt from counter steering, and my face hurts from laughing. And I really appreciate that Miata does that. It's just, it's in a class of 1 or 2 if we have BRZ. But I have one issue with it. They're $40,000 now. And I don't know if it's me getting older and like living working in a career where my income has not kept pace with the price of cars, but like, I can't see spending $38,000 or $40,000 on a Miata.
The last Miata that I bought was $7,000.
But that's an NA, right? But like, I love that ND, but if I'm gonna spend $30,000 on a giggle machine, I'm gonna buy a Hyundai Veloster N or a GTI. And that's
but then you'll be giggling in German in the GTI. It's not the same thing. It'll
giggling
be
in German?
Well, it's very like...
Ha, 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 this was very fun. I will enjoy this.
Exactly.
Ha, ha, ha. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a different type of giggle. But I mean, like, you can buy so like an NC2, you can buy a superb NC2 for $15,000, $20,000.
I just worry that
half the money.
Yeah, but I worry that they've priced, like, I don't think $40,000 for a fully loaded Miata is an outrage. But I just think that the world has changed. And like, you know, when the original Miata came out, it was the same effective price as it is today, adjusted for inflation. And I don't know if it's just the people around me that don't have that kind of money to spend on a toy. And I see sales numbers for Miata as dwindling. And ND is probably the best Miata yet in terms of Miata-ing. And I'm worried that we're all like, oh yeah, the used ones are fucking crazy value, but I don't see all that many people buying new ones.
I mean, I always feel that way about buying new cars, like the depreciation and like what goes with that. Like, I don't understand why anyone ever buys a new car.
I mean, I'm in the business of selling people new cars, and I can't justify it to my friends.
You're not in the business of selling anything.
I'm not in the business of selling anything, but I'm in the business of celebrating new cars, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I go and test drive all these cars, and it's only $90,000. Huh? I've never spent $90,000 on a car, and I certainly am not in a position to spend $90,000 on a new car. So in that sense, judged against all of the other performance cars, the Miata is a hell of a bargain. But I had an NA, and I didn't love it. Like, I liked it. It was fine.
Yeah, but yours wasn't a good one.
Right. But I've never driven a good one. Like, okay, I drove yours. So you have a 92, right, with a 1.8 swap. So it's a 1.8 and headers on it and Öhlins dampers, which some previous crazy owner has spent more on the shocks than the car's worth. And it's good. I mean, it's fun. It is genuinely fun, mostly because that engine is woken up. Sorry, as the kids say, that motor's woke, yo. That motor is woke No, that's in the proper use, isn't it? The motor's alive in places. Stop making fun of the old man. Hold on.
Bullshit detected. Take precautions.
Know what I'm talking about. No, that motor is woken up. Like, I think that thing's got cams in it or something. Like, it's just alive at the top, like from 5,000 to 7,000 RPM. That thing is gnarly. It's pissed off, and it's making a lot of power. Yeah. And that was my problem with the NA. Was like, it's got.
I mean, maybe yours was tired out.
Mine just sucked. I didn't love it. But NB's like that at all. And I even like an NB MazdaSpeed, that turbo.
Oh, turbo makes
horrible.
it worse. I like it's faster and it makes me like laugh, but I'm more laughing at the car.
Well,
than,
and it's
like,
slower. I mean, an NB MazdaSpeed is slower than an NC2. Like, and by the way, in real world where you're waiting for all that through all
very
that turbo
short,
lag,
like absurdly short gearing.
they didn't really gear it properly for an engine with that much lag, where you kind of want to be able in a gear for a long period of time. So that, and then NC1, like I just remember driving and I was like, wow, shades of what used to be. And then NC2. Most people don't realize how big of a difference there is between NC1 and 2.
Yeah.
Like, but 7,700 RPM and like the best shifter since the NA.
Cut off.
It's cut off, yeah. Red line.
Because the red line is
72.
70, yeah, it's a little lower.
There's nothing more awesome than being 500 into rev. And then I asked the guys at Mazda, I'm like, how much should we rev this? And Dave Coleman, who's like the head dynamics guy, who's like fucking total car nerd, was like, there's a reason we put the limiter at 7,750. I'm like, all right then, red line it is, 500 in. But yeah, I think it upsets me that how many people are like, Miata this, and they just brush it off. And they never drive the cars.
Well, that's not. So people who do that, I believe, are either haven't experienced one, and therefore they're just sort of going at face value, where they look at the horsepower and they look at the sort of form factor, and so either they haven't driven it, and or they're buying cars for a different reason, which is like they're after the prestige
Status,
or the
right.
status or the brand or
Right.
like there's obviously things to be enjoyed about other cars, and I don't think it's like the answer for every problem or every sports car experience, but I think that it is like can provide as thrilling an experience as cars that cost 10 times as much.
Okay, so let's think about this. Let's say the average price of a used like NC2 would be like 15. So what could you get under 150,000 bucks? What have you driven under 150,000 bucks that for 10 times the price, i.e. that is in the same realm of fun as a Miata?
A well set up air-cooled 911.
Get out! Now you turn back into that prick who's like, you need to show up in an air-cooled 911. Really?
When they're well set up, they are like outstanding, just batshit.
Incredible cars, but not fun. I can't
So
enjoy a
much
car with a
laughing.
200 RPM, a 200 mile an hour second gear like that.
I'm not talking about air-cooled
Air-cooled
911s.
is still geared too long. Like 993s are absurd. All the late cars, they were all, by the time they got any power, they were geared so long that it was like stupid. I don't know. I've never had that much fun. The only times I've had fun in air-cooled 911s that would like even come close to a Miata was like on winter tires at Weissach, at the Porsche's Proving Grounds, in all the old air-cooled cars, sideways at like 4.5 miles an hour. That was Giggle Fest. But I don't ever think of 911s as fun.
Really?
And the Giggle Fest as the way Miata.
I've had those experiences for
Okay.
sure.
Interesting.
What else under 150?
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you have A1 Volkswagens. I did just drive a Peugeot 205 GTI recently, and that's up there. I think
Yeah.
the VWs
I
are a
could
little
see
more
that.
fun, but they're better, slightly better car. What else? BRZ, Veloster, and maybe a Civic Type R. I haven't driven it yet, but everyone seems to love it. So basically, your choice is hot hatches. But notice we're not saying like Aston Martins, Ferraris. Like there's nothing that comes close to.
No, I would agree with that.
I wish more people knew that. I wish more people like really understood like a 308 GTB Magnum PI car is fucking absolutely gorgeous. Or even better examples, a Testarossa, there's one over there. Like that is a magnificent GT, but there's nothing fun about that car.
No,
No,
I totally agree with
but
that.
it looks fun.
A well set up Alpha GTV
Yes. Alpha GTV.
or a Giulietta if you want like really skinny tires.
Yep.
Those cars can
They can be
do
fun.
that too. But like they're very sensitive to setup, and so many of them are like crappy, or like
Right.
they may have excuses, or like you're like, oh, this part's really good, but the rest of it's rubbish, or like this car seems to have been rear-ended very hard, and like
What
it's
about,
never
like,
been the same since.
other weird,
or-
obscure 70s shit like Cortinas and
I haven't driven
like
a Cortina
Escorts and
hard.
stuff.
I'm sure you could get there with something like that. Yeah.
I
Or
kind of feel-
E30 M3. I have never like driven one hard enough to
on
experience
track,
the joy.
they're magic. They're really, really good, but not giggle. It's not like a giggle. It's not going to like on the back road. It's not going to make you laugh. It's just going to be like, wow, this is an incredibly good tool. The Miata, I think part of what's fun about it is it's so out of control in terms of suspension tuning. Like, you know, you turn in and the rear end flops over and then the car skips like a foot to the side and then it stops there. It doesn't like bite you. And you're like, oh my God, I just defied death. Haha, let me do it again. One side, you know, on like switchbacks, you're literally like probably going to overheat the shocks from the body roll. And there's something fun about like, this thing is completely out of sorts. It doesn't know what the fuck it's doing. It's all wrong and yet so much fun.
And it's like expendable. I think expendability has a lot to do with it.
I mean, I consider you expendable, but that doesn't make you funnier.
What about more fun?
I guess if I knew that I could kill you and like no one would really
Wow.
care. I think that's probably the end of this episode because you're never going to talk to me again.
Because I'll be dead.
I didn't say I was going to kill you. I'm just saying if I knew that if no one missed you, that you could like die in some horrible way, would it be fun for me to watch?
I'm gonna leave.
Okay. Well, tune in for the next episode of the Carmudgeon Show where I introduce my new host, who I haven't
It's
murdered
gonna be
just for
you.
fun. It's just going to be me. Get off my lawn! You know, I guess it's on character and on brand for me to kill my co-host. Here's the timer. Look, we are officially out of time here, so I guess I'm not going to kill you, dude. It's all good.
Okay.
No, it's okay. People will miss you. People will miss. Look, right? Won't you miss Derek Tam-Scott? Right? Somebody? Anyone?
Crickets.
Fuck. All right,
That'll be our
okay.
next episode.
Will anyone miss Derek if he's gone? Let's vote.
Will be you killing me.
Like vote Derek off the island.